On Take It to the Bank, you'll find ways to get out of debt, solve your credit card problems, how to make and stick with a budget, simple ways to save, buying or selling a home, and many more financial matters on Take It to the Bank.
Hi, my name is Cordell Thomas, and I welcome you to our program on Take It to the Bank. Today, we'd like to talk about a variety of things, specifically in reference to debt. This is considered a serious program because this is one of the areas that a lot of us are trying to contend with, and dealing with these issues on debt is very, very important as we proceed in becoming debt-free and becoming the individuals that Christ would have us to be. There were a couple of questions that I asked in the last program, which I'd like to answer those questions as we lead into what we'll be talking about today. One of the first questions was in reference to risk. It said, basically, who insures your money in the stock market? And the answer to that is actually no one does. When you invest in the stock market, you're taking risk, and investing is a long-term process. It means you will be dealing with the ups and downs of whatever the market has to deal with. And we've been seeing in the news a lot of how the volatility in the market has impacted a lot of people's 401ks. Risk may be a good thing, may be a bad thing. I'm not telling you what to do, but it is a risk situation. And if you don't have the access and funds to invest in the market, wait until you have got the fundamentals in what budgeting and financial literacy is all about. The second question we asked had to do with the law provides a buyer a 3-day right to cancel. The answer to that one is actually false. The law does not require dealers to give you, a buyer, the right to a 3-day right to cancel. The right is totally discretionary on the dealer's part, and it's something that you, if you go in to acquire a car, need to get things in writing if you are planning to walk out with a new car. Now, there's a couple of issues. When you go to a dealer, make sure you remember you're the buyer. Don't get sold something that you don't necessarily need. And if you're planning to make a major acquisition, one of the best things you can do is taking 3 days, go home, and ask yourself, do I really need this, or is this a want? Think of what a dealer is always trying to do. They're trying to get you to feel good in the car. Guess what they say is, wow, you look in the car. Take the car on a test drive. Wow, the new car smell. The context is quite interesting because I used to work in the automotive industry, and we used to study consumers. You know, we knew the demographics between 18 to 24-year-olds, 36 to 40-year-olds. We can tell you exactly what you wanted specifically under your dynamics. So the dealer is using that information, that consumer information, and talking to you in a way that would drive you to buy. There are a variety of things we are going to talk about when it comes to purchasing a vehicle in another program, but the issue that we're talking about here is about the right to cancel and the cooling off period. A dealer does not have to do that for you, and it is important that you get all of that information in writing. I believe that cooling off period applied to door-to-door salespeople that would come to your door and try to sell you different things. Vacuum cleaners, widgets, books, whatever the case may be. But the key is this: if they sell you something at your front door of $25 or more, you should have a 72-hour cooling off period where you can say, you know, I really didn't need that. I'd like to get my money back, and here's whatever you tried to sell me back. What we'd like to do, though, is in this case, it's a relatively serious lesson in reference to financial literacy. And I'd like to introduce it on debt and how we get out of debt. The issues that we're dealing with in this case are relatively significant. And as I thought about talking about this issue, I tried to consider a variety of different approaches. But the first thing I'd like to do is provide you a couple of resources that are out there. There's a lot of information on money guides, on budgetary basics, there are websites that we can send you to. One of the things that I've found that's very enlightening are some software programs that one of my children is actually excited about playing because he teaches them about setting a goal. That's what budgeting is all about. And getting to that goal. So he wants to go to a specific fun park, or if he wants to go to a zoo or whatever the case is, he now knows he can save that money and apply the savings to the acquisition or the purchase of that specific product. Right now, my son has on his agenda buying a new bike. And it's kind of exciting to watch the enthusiasm as he goes out and rakes leaves, helps with the yard projects, and assists in doing certain things. I think it's essential, though, as we talk about those elements, there are resources that we can provide and give you those specific concerns. What I'd like to talk about now is the verses in the Bible and that we discussed at another program. It's key to understand what wealth really is. And we talked before in Matthew. Matthew is the first book of the New Testament, Matthew 25, and we have verse 14. And it talks about the parable of the talents. And you remember the gentleman that received the 1 talent, and he did nothing with it. He buried it in the sand or buried it in the backyard or wherever. He didn't do anything with the money. And the master comes back and says, "You wicked servant, you could have at least placed this money in the bank where it could have gotten simple interest and given me at least something back on my investment." And he took that money away from that servant and he gave that talent or that skill to someone else. In reference to the talent, he gave a talent of money in this case. The other issue we talked about in another program was to talk about wealth is not just about money. When we looked at James 2, verses 5 through 9, it tells us there are other wealth factors. James, it's also in the New Testament, and if you look at how to find James, from the end of the book Revelation, just go back 5 books, and you'll find James. You go through Revelation, Jude, the 3 Peters, the 2 Johns, and you'll find James. James 2, verses 5 through 9. And as you look at that, it talks about the issue of, 1, not playing favorites, and realizing that we all have skills. We have a wealth of a specific type of skill that Christ has given to each one of us, and he's going to hold us responsible for. But in James, it's very specific, and it says that please don't try to play favorites. If someone walks in and is dressed wealthy and has a ring on his finger, don't treat him any different than the poor person or the apparently poor individual monetarily that comes to your same church facility. If you have problems finding certain Bible verses and you would like to learn more about that, I'd ask you to find your local Seventh-day Adventist church and ask them, and they will be more than happy to give you Bible studies and show you how to find the books of the Bible. We're on a journey. We're on a journey together, and I will tell you a short story. Have you ever run a marathon? I have. It's one of the most interesting things I've ever done, but one of the most educational things I've ever done. I remember it was approximately June, July of 1999. Okay, I've dated myself. Whatever. It doesn't matter. The case is this. I started training in earnest to run my first marathon. I had targeted October 1999 for this Marine Corps marathon, and it was intense. The training was great. Did 3 or 4 days of weight training during the week, and then the other 3 days I started on Sunday and ran about 12 to 15 miles. On Tuesday, we brought it down to about 8 miles, and on Thursday, we just did about 3 or 4 miles, and then took a break for the weekend. I had a problem where my Achilles tendon started winding up and tightening, and I didn't know why. So my doctor told me, hey, you got to stop running or you're going to snap your Achilles, and it will cause you a lot more pain, and you will never run the marathon. So take a break and go see a doctor. So I did. He said, you can't run. What I need to do is get you an orthotic device so you can be better able to run the marathon. So we got the orthotic. I had to take 3 or 4 weeks off in my training, and before I could get back into it, it was already towards the end of August of that year. Remember, the marathon was in October. So now I had taken a break from that intense training and had to get back into it, not realizing that there's going to be a whole shift to how that training was going to work. I got orthotics in my shoes and I'm starting to get back into training, but as I trained and ramped up to the marathon, I really never did another trek of over 14 or 15 miles. And then I flew out to Washington, D.C. and got prepped for this marathon where about 25,000 people were getting ready to run. I still remember it of this day, and I can tell you mile by mile by mile what I had to deal with. The first few miles were kind of interesting because I had everyone around me. And the first point is, in a crowd, everything is easy. In a crowd, everything is easy. Debt is easy because everyone is doing it. Think differently. Okay, so I jump into the marathon. It took me a full 8 minutes to get to the starting line because there's so many people ahead of me. I finally get there and I start this trek, and it's an exciting process. I'm hearing the hoorahs from all the Marines. I'm seeing all the sights and sounds of Washington, D.C., and I didn't even feel the first 6 or 7 miles of the marathon. Of course, then you see a break in the crowds, and then you begin to feel the loneliness. Mile 10, mile 11. I came through the smallest little area of the marathon, and I could see the people ahead of me, I could hear people behind me, and it's at that point in time, at that point in the marathon, that you start seeing emergency vehicles and emergency personnel helping people who really weren't prepared for this race. We get to mile 15, and it actually was mile 13, where I started feeling a pain in my knee, and I couldn't figure out what it was about. But all I could begin to understand was this orthotic device I wasn't used to, and I'd never used it to run over 15 miles. So I get to mile 13, 14, I feel this pain in my knee. And I begin to understand that there's problems ahead. There are going to be challenges. Anytime you try to change a behavior, there are going to be hurdles to get over. Second point. So mile 15, I get to mile 15, and I can't go any further. I'm in pain. This thing is hurting me. I can't do it. And I remember there's this long corridor, this long street that you had to go down, and there's a curb on the side. So I had to hobble over to the curb and sit down. And I'm sitting with my chin in my hands, and I'm thinking, this can't happen. I paid all this money. I flew to Washington. I'm running this marathon. I have to complete this marathon, but I can't do it. I can't do it. There comes points in times in your life that you feel you just can't overcome, but you can. Always believe, because God will send someone or something in your life to help you through that challenge. Okay, what was my angel in disguise? I was sitting on the side, and out of the blue came this biker dude. He had black, long hair, and it was tied in the back. It was gray on one side, it was black on the other. And I began to understand full servitude, full humility, and love. This biker dude walked up to me as an individual and said, "Dude, you look like you're in pain." Well, yeah, I'm hurting. My knee hurts. He says, "You know what works? This stuff, Tiger Balm." And he rubbed this stuff out, and he rubbed it into my knee. Full service. And he helped me, and I could feel the heat, and he helped me put a brace around my knee, and he said, "Hey, come on, let's go. We can do it." And I got up, and I started walking and hobbling, and with this gentleman beside me, helping me along the route between miles 15 and mile 22, I got to this place in the marathon of no return. Now, when I got to mile 22, this gentleman disappeared. Point number 3 is this. When you get to a point where you feel you can't go on, ask God to help you. He will, and He will send the right person, an angel, or the right resource to get you through this thing that we'll be talking about in reference to debt. Debt is a thing that's hurting a lot of people in this country, and it would take a start. It's going to be a marathon for some. It might be a sprint for others, and for some, you're already budgeting and taking care of your resources in the right way. But this, I believe, is an essential segment, a program to tell you that debt is a real thing, and you need to overcome in this race of life. Mile 22, I got to this bridge, in Washington, D.C., that if you didn't get to it within 4.5 to 5 hours, they were going to close the bridge or open the bridge back to traffic, and you couldn't get across it. So you had a certain time limit to cross the bridge in order to finish the race. And he got me to the bridge with about 15 minutes to spare before they opened it up to traffic. And we crossed the bridge. And for some unknown reason, I never got this gentleman's name. I can still recognize the gentleman, but I don't know if I can ever reach him again. If he was real, I don't know if he was an angel in disguise, because he disappeared. I turned around and looked after I crossed that hurdle. And the remaining portion of the race was 4 miles. 4 miles of a jog run that I couldn't believe that I was actually going to accomplish this. Here is a point. When I got to the finish line, did I feel any pain? No, I didn't feel any pain. Well, 15 minutes after, yeah, I was in a lot of pain. But when I crossed the threshold and got to that specific destination, crossing the line was a relief. I had accomplished the goal of this marathon that I'd always wanted to do, and took a picture, felt good about myself, and walked away. My brother picked me up, took me to his apartment, and I sat down in a cold tub of ice as I felt the pain of contracting muscles and doing something that I'd never done before. But I had accomplished the objective. And our objective today is to talk to you about the critical nature of debt in the United States. Do you know that the average person has 3.5 credit cards? Do you know the average family debt in credit is $14,750? We are a country that rides on credit. And we talked about the car and going into a dealership and having a car sold to you. Always remember that you as a consumer should be in control. And no one can or should ever be able to sell you anything that you do not necessarily need. I give you a hint. If you go to make an acquisition, take time to shop around. And when you think about the fact that you're ready to make the purchase, take a step back and take 3 days to cool off and consider whether or not this is a need, this is a want, or whether or not that car that you currently have can be maintained and can carry you a few more years. That's my story. We are on a journey together. This marathon is going to be worth it when we are done, because we are going to take care of this issue on debt together. Now, what I'd like you all to do is follow me. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the context of how you assess the fact that you're getting into trouble. We did a little bit of research, and we went out on the street and talked to a variety of people about what they did. And the question was, regarding your credit, are you likely to carry a balance on your credit card, or do you pay them off each month? We took some select interviews, and I'd like to watch that right now.
I try to pay them off each month. Currently at this moment, I don't have any credit cards because I have had a problem in the past, so I am doing just debit cards and cash only to help myself mature financially a little bit. But when I did have credit cards, I tried to make sure that they were paid off on a monthly basis.
I carry a balance because that's the only way you can increase your credit. But the problem is you normally fall back like I have. But it's only because of the economy.
With my credit cards, I actually carry a small balance.
You can see the different perspectives about credit. Some carry balances, some don't. Some have credit cards, some don't. The context really is how you manage the credit. Now, I use that to introduce the issue of understanding some warning signs that are relevant. How do you know when you're getting in trouble? And what are some of the relevant points to watch? Trouble comes when you are overspending. Overspending tells us that you may not have a budget. It tells us that you are winging it. And that's one of the first concerns that many people don't realize, that problems begin to happen when you are not tracking what's going on in your personal life. I always go back to, and I'm going to be hammering this over the next few programs, is budgets are necessary to have a starting point. So assess whether or not you're overspending. And you will know that because pretty much there's not enough money in the bank to carry your expenses. I used the term in another program of revenue. I want to make it simple. Revenue is basically your paycheck. A paycheck that you get on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis. The money that goes into your account as income. The expenses are basically those funds that go out of your account to take care of your monthly bills, whether or not it is variable bills, whether variable expenses such as gas can go up and down each month. It could be the phone bill up and down each month. It could be other variable type of expenses. And you have the fixed expense. It's always the same amount each month, so your car expense, your rent, those type of things, or your mortgage. As we take a look at the spending issue, it's key that we address those specific concerns. Secondarily, rising interest rates. If your credit card interest rate is going up, it tells you that you've missed a payment. Credit cards can raise the interest rate if you miss a payment. Second warning sign. Number 3, a mismanaged budget. You set a budget, and then the two of you, maybe if you're married, one is a spender, one is a saver, one likes to go out and spontaneously purchase things, another wants to save. So you have a budget, someone sets up the budget, and one of them overspends and goes out and does something on a spontaneous basis. You mismanage a budget, it's one of the sure signs that there's going to be problems in the future. 3, increased cost of living. Cost of living happens. If you're basically maintaining, you're spending exactly what you make, there's a problem because gas prices have gone up. And so when you have a fuel that goes up 50 cents per gallon, it means it's going to cost more to fill your tank. Something else has to give. Unemployment. Physical emergencies, a water tank, for example, a water heater that you might need. And then, of course, the thing that wipes out a lot of people in reference to their ability to keep wealth is disabilities and illness. So what can you do short term if you can't keep up? There's a couple things I'd like you to look at. First, assess the warning signs. Are you looking at any one of those? Overspending? Are you looking at credit card interest rates going up? Are you looking at a variety of different issues? Take that into context and assess where you're at. Secondarily, if you have a credit card issue, I ask you to do a couple of things. Call your creditors immediately if you can't make the payment. If, in fact, you've lost your job, those are major concerns that you need to address immediately. Call them up and tell them you're having some problems. Most times they will work with you and they will tell you what they can do on your behalf. Try to keep paying a little bit back on those accounts as you possibly can. Cut your living expenses. It goes back to now, if I have a budget, I can understand what areas I need to look at that I can possibly cut. Do I need the cable? Do I need the cable television? Do I need some of these other niceties that I can cut right now? Can I take a look at insurance and getting a different type of insurance quote? Take a look at cutting those expenses that you don't necessarily really need. And then begin to understand how much credit you currently have, how much credit you can really afford. I talked to you earlier about the 20-10 rule. 20-10 rule basically says don't absorb more than 20% of your annual income as credit, and don't pay out on a monthly basis as a percentage of your net monthly income, 10%, more than 10% on a monthly basis. Those are key. Now, as we go towards closing, I want to give you a mnemonic device in reference to getting out of debt. 1, the acronym is ACCSA. ACCSA. 1 is assess the level of your debt. How much do you owe? Find out what it is. How much is credit card debt? How much is it in, how much you owe in your car? What do you owe on your mortgage? Assess the complete amount of indebtedness. And then, of course, what you need to do after that is C means to create. A, assess. C, create a budget. It might be beneficial to turn those two around and say create the budget first and then assess the debt. But the context is creating the budget is key to help you better look at where those expenses are being paid. And then take a look at where that debt actually is. Number 3, cut your spending. Work with your creditors. Take things out that you don't need. Pay off what, I guess you can't really pay it off at that point in time, but cutting the expenses will free up a little bit more money and help you within the context of creating that margin. Margin is a difference between the income and the expenses that can go towards helping you pay off that current debt. Then, of course, once you have that margin in place and you have the budget, you now know how much you can save. Start putting money into savings. Save. It's essential to help from that standpoint. And then number 5 is attack the debt. Attack the debt. Go after it and try to get rid of it as quickly as possible. And right now, I want to pray for some of you out there that are dealing with this crisis in America of indebtedness. We can go on this marathon, this journey, this sprint, whatever this race is together. We can accomplish a lot together, and we're going to do it together in this program of financial literacy. But it takes that first step. We're in training together. I want you to do the first mile tomorrow. That first mile is figure out your expenses, figure out your income, and let's figure out where we can cut the expenses and where we can figure out how we can put more away in savings and how we can take that money and attack that debt that we have. If you will, let's pray together. Father in heaven, we thank you for this opportunity to talk to you and to understand the context of wealth and as a steward being faithful. Help us now to get out of debt so we can support you more in giving back to your ministry and to use the talents that we will be held accountable for when you come. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, we're on a journey together. I want you to take a look seriously at any type of warning signs that there is a problem. We can take a look at 5. 1 is you don't know how much you owe. We need to figure that out. Number 2, you're late paying your bills. You're constantly looking for cash to pay something and you're constantly late and it's getting behind. 3, you're taking out a new loan to cover old loans. 4, you're paying only the minimum amount on your credit card bill each month. And 5, you're spending more than 20% of your net income after rent and mortgage on credit use. Those are 5 warning signs that there is a problem. What I ask you to do is make a change. Let's start together. Take it to the bank and save. See you next time. God bless.
Take It